And so I want to explain a little bit more on here that, yeah, steak and applesauce are completely different, but I wasn't using applesauce to represent the type of food, but what happens to your food in your stomach. That's called chyme. Chyme's just a fancy word for a semi-liquid mush that becomes food that we consume. Depending on the type of food you consume, so let's say steak, when it enters the stomach, it then meets the enzyme that's going to break it down. Carbs actually break down in your mouth and fats in your small intestine, but steak's going to break down in your stomach and it will also turn into chyme, as all things do. And so that applesauce was a representation of chyme. Turns into chyme. We want it to sit in our stomach long enough for our body to pull some of those nutrients out. Now, the demonstration in the video is that if we add liquid, we speed that process up. Then chyme becomes diluted, dumps into our small intestine, and very shortly afterwards, we become hungry again. Now, you would think that after you have weight loss surgery, you'd be sent home with a lot of information, understanding the digestive tract, why you do things the way you do, but no, you don't. You end up having to come to TikTok for that information. So let's say your dinner is steak and vegetables, protein and fiber. You also are drinking during that entire process. You're still speeding up the digestive process. You are still speeding up how long that food sits in your stomach, regardless of its contents. You'll see that some bariatric doctors, like even Dr. Clapp, says, hey, if you have to take a little sip of water, that's totally fine, and it is. Kind of mind-blowing how many people commented on that video. I eat and drink all the same time. Asking me about soups and purees, and that's a whole other subject we can get into. I would limit the amount of soups you're consuming post-op, mostly because they're really high in fat. If you're making a homemade broth, that's a different thing. But most soups out on the market, like at the grocery store, have ingredients and macros that aren't designed for someone who had weight loss surgery. So at the end of the day, you don't want to eat and drink because you're trying to slow down the digestive process. And just to make this make even more sense to you, how a GLP-1 works is it also slows down that digestive process, keeping you full. Just by simply not eating and drinking at the same time, you get kind of the effects that a GLP-1 has out there. So if you're starting to regain your weight or you've stalled, and you're months out, I'm not talking about you people who are in the first 3 fucking months here. Slow down. Surgery has to do some things. But for those of you further out, experiencing a stall, gaining weight, I want you to know that you can slow this whole process back, not just with changing the diet, but also changing how fast you eat. It's important that you chew 20, 30, 40 times, especially if it's something like steak and vegetables. You want to break that down as much as you can by the time it gets to the stomach, so the stomach can spend its time pulling the nutrients. And this leads me to a whole other subject called cider foods, and I'm going to make you guys a video on that as well. Don't eat and drink at the same time. If you're going to leave a comment on here telling me that you do that, cool, kudos for you. But for the most of you guys out there who want to be successful, I'll tell you, one of the common denominators I've seen in people years and years post-op is that they still do not eat and drink at the same time so that they can stay full longer.